Welcome everyone to NJTESOL-NJBE's Literacy PLC for today. It is called The Writing Group, and today we have Maria Halkias from Stockton State University and Christiana Dalton from West Windsor Plainsboro High School. And so welcome to everyone, and thank you ladies for presenting, and you may begin.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Maria Halkias. I'm an assistant professor at Stockton University. I work in the MAED, the master's program, and I work primarily with the ESL bilingual education endorsement. But previous to that, I was also a reading specialist in the northern part of the state, working both as a early childhood teacher and a first grade teacher. I worked in various public and private sectors in education.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christiana Dalton. I am a high school English as a second language or multilingual learner teacher at West Windsor Plainsboro School District. I teach English, and then I also co-teach algebra and history. In the past, I've also taught K-5 ESL and high school pull-out ESL, and I also taught English as a foreign language in Thailand.
So tonight we're going to be talking about the writing rope. And one of the first things we want to get going, if it's working, is a little engagement activity. And we hope that if you use your phone, you can scan the QR code here and answer this question once you have been able to log in. What comes to mind when you think about writing? Give another few seconds. Everyone can log in. Yeah. So we have creativity, we have struggle, we have voice, great words, idea, grammar. Excellent. Really great stuff.
Expressive, yeah, absolutely. Inform. Writing is an outlet for creativity and self-expression. Absolutely.
So I'm going to move on to one more quick engagement, and there's a reason and purpose for this. If you guys can now answer this question, how do you feel about your own writing skills? Would you say one, when you're writing, it's sort of like a blizzard, kind of reminding you this past weekend? Does it feel like a survival exercise? Do you do it because you have to, but you're exhausted and cold the whole time? Is writing stressing for you? Does it stress you out? Is your thoughts scattered, chaotic, or overwhelming? Or do you feel too that it's clear skies? You see exactly where the project is going. You know exactly the direction you're headed for. It's a blank horizon. Or is it foggy? You have the general idea, but you're unsure how the project will end, or if you're heading in the right direction.
And then one person in the chat said foggy. It looks like foggy is the majority so far.
And we'll let's go a few more seconds. I think that generally foggy is in the lead there. right. Well, I think that at the lead is Foggy. So you guys do feel like you have a general sense about your own writing skills, but you're sort of unsure how the project's going to end up. And even if potentially maybe you're not headed towards the right direction in terms of your own feelings towards your writing skill. And so the reason we share a lot of this is because what Krashen has said in a previous interview is that writing and the process of revision are the true keys to intellectual progress and clearer thinking. And this is very helpful when we think about the insights that we all feel about writing. Sometimes we feel overwhelmed by it. Sometimes we feel like we're headed towards the right direction, but sometimes we just don't want to interact with it or partake in it. But what ultimately is really important is that sometimes when you think about the way you're taught writing as an educator, when we work with our students, that perhaps we teach our own students in the same way we were taught. And whatever feelings that you have that you carried over about writing is also the same way that you might interpret it in your own classroom setting. And so what's really important to think about when we think about writing is because of this, writing is not a natural skill. It is demanding. It's highly complex process. And tonight we're going to be talking about the writing rope, and we're going to talk about the strands of the writing rope. And a lot of our resources are from Joan Sedita. And also we have in the chat a PDF with some resources on the writing rope. So feel free to download it. It gives you some websites and some examples of the things that we're going to be talking about this evening.
Right, thank you, Maria. Yeah, so like Maria said, tonight we're going to be focusing the majority of our presentation on the writing rope, which is a text by Joan Sedita. You can imagine yourself as the figure in the photo heading towards classroom application. Some of the road signs that we'll see on the way are, of course, supporting our multilingual learners and taking into consideration the strategies and complexity of writing. Okay, we can continue. And as Kathy and Maria mentioned before, this is number 5 in the PLC series, and the information from our presentation is from this book called The Writing Rope, a framework for explicit writing instruction in all subjects. It was written by Joan Sedita. So on this slide, I have an overview of the structure of the book. Sedita breaks up the book into 3 sections. We're going to primarily focus on sections 1 and 2 in this presentation because that's where the bulk of the writing rope is discussed. Section 3 has a lot of additional resources that you could download online, but we're going to be focusing on the actual strands of the writing rope, and we'll also talk a little bit about the research in a minute. Yep, so first thing we'll discuss is just an overview of the writing rope itself, the research that backs up why Sedita came up with the writing rope, and then we'll go through each of the strands. Chapters 3 and 4 are the first 2 strands, transcription skills and the writing craft. And then we'll continue on. Maria, could click, please. To critical thinking, then syntax and sentence skills, and finally we'll finish out with text structure. Like I said, we'll briefly hit this section about the critical thinking skills earlier in the presentation, but in the book she does have additional chapters about critical thinking. So first, an overview of the writing rope. This is a figure created by Joan Sedita, and it's similar to Scarborough's reading rope, and it has 5 different strands. So tonight we're going to be talking about each of these 5 strands, so critical thinking, syntax, text structure, writing craft, and transcription. We just put an image up of the reading rope just to show that Sedita designed the writing rope intentionally to mirror the reading rope because to have foundational writing skills and skilled writing, it looks similar to how skilled reading looks. So there are many different factors that come into play for students in order to reach a level that's considered skilled in terms of writing. and she was inspired by Scarborough's reading rope when developing this theory. In chapter 2, Sadida kind of summarizes the major findings in the field of effective writing instruction. One thing that she notes in that second chapter is having students write about text and write more in general, as well as teaching them explicitly strategies for summarizing, writing collaboratively, and engaging in pre-writing and inquiry activities. These are considered some of the most effective things that an instructor can do when teaching writing. Below the main recommendations. So I guess this slide is pretty important because this is the overall recommendation that Sadida finds after reading through the research, that instruction in the writing process and writing strategies is very important. Frequent writing for varied purposes, so not just one topic in isolation or only opinion writing. Integration of writing and reading is critical. Students should be writing about what they read. Building students' fluency in transcription and sentence skills is really the foundation for effective writing, and building student engagement in the context of a writing community and studying and emulating models of good writing are all the most important strategies that are backed by research in terms of effective writing instruction. We do have a couple slides. Maria, we can actually go one more. Recommendations that Sadida put specifically for teaching elementary school students versus teaching secondary level students. Some of the recommendations Sadida includes for teaching elementary students is providing them daily time to write, teaching students to use the writing process for different purposes. First, recommendation 3, becoming fluent in handwriting, which we'll talk about in a minute, and creating an engaged community of writers are really important strategies for elementary students. And then for secondary students, Sadida highlights 3 important recommendations. Explicitly teaching appropriate writing strategies using a model practice reflect instructional cycle. Another recommendation is integrating writing and reading to emphasize key writing features. As we mentioned before, right, those skills are intertwined, and she based the writing rope off of the reading rope. And the third recommendation, using assessments of student writing to inform instruction and feedback. Sadida also provides a not so simple view of writing, right? Students need to be activating their working memory. They need transcription skills, executive functioning, and text generation in order to produce quality writing. And she also highlights 7 important teaching principles. We will discuss number 1 quite a bit in the presentation. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the I do, we do, you do approach. She also recommends explicit instruction of writing strategies, the same way we talk about the science of reading. Number 3, differentiated instruction. 4, scaffolding. 5, opportunities for collaboration with peers. 6, using mentor texts as models for writing, and increasing the amount students write in every subject area. So the same way that there's the misconception that only English teachers are reading teachers, that applies to writing as well. Every content area teacher is also a writing teacher.
Okay, so we're going to actually now just slow down a little bit because we gave you a broad kind of overview about some of the important things that Joan Sadida mentioned in her research. However, let's take a look at the framework, specifically the 5 strands of the rope. And I will emphasize here that writing, again, is not a skill, a single skill, excuse me. It's a complex task. And that's kind of why we wanted to get your feedback initially about how you feel about writing, because really it requires the integration of all of these components: critical thinking, syntax, text structure, writing craft, and transcription. So if I were going to go into a little bit about each of the strands, I would say that transcription is a focus on mechanical skills like spelling and handwriting and keyboarding. writing craft is the art of writing. I would consider it that it's involving choosing words carefully, developing a voice, using techniques like dialogue or figurative language to engage the reader. And critical thinking is really the thinking part of writing. It includes gathering ideas and following the writing process, which is to think, to plan, to write, and revise. And finally, syntax is really focuses on sentences. It involves grammar and arranging words to create clear and effective sentences, while text structure, the last part of this, is how writing is organized. So it includes an understanding different types of writing and building strong paragraphs and using transition words to connect ideas. So this is sort of that broad overview of the strands. But now let's go a little bit further into each strand. And then Christiana and I will kind of give you, based on our lens, I said I was an early childhood and elementary teacher focused, and Christiana will provide more of the middle school and high school lens of what this might look like in the classroom. So let's talk a little bit about the first strand. So what are transcription skills? So transcription skills are the mechanics of writing. And handwriting is very complex. It requires a coordination of cognitive, motor, neuromotor processes, including grip, including posture, and fine motor control. So a key focus in the area is spelling and handwriting and keyboarding. And another element of this is to imagine with transcription skills that you are also lifting the cognitive load. And so when these skills are not automatic, students use too much of their mental energy just trying to spell out or form letters, leaving little room for higher level thinking, which you need for planning and organizing. So really here, the emphasis is on fluency of this transcription skills so that there is an opportunity for higher order skills later on for storytelling and for composition. So the goal is overall to lift the cognitive load so that it's automatic and students can use much more of the mental energy on mechanics. And so what is the focus here? So in an elementary setting, primarily when you think about kindergarten and first grade, you're going to be working on these fine motor skills. You're going to incorporate multisensory spelling. You're going to be thinking about the visual end of this. And really what we also would say is that you are focusing on connecting spelling and to more visual and motor skills. So what would this look like in the classroom? You could use skywriting, air writing letters or words while saying sounds. I do a lot of tap and spell, which if you're working with early childhood, you'll know this is a very common practice. Tactile tracing, tracing in sand, tracing in salt, textured paper, sandpaper. You can also include time flash writing, so write letters or words repeatedly for 30 seconds. So let me pause here again. How confident do you feel in your ability to teach writing to multilingual learners? How comfortable do you feel? It looks like most of us are, Christiana, would just say somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Here's a piece that we wanted to emphasize because in each of these strands, we want to give you a little bit of the multilingual learner lens. What we want to emphasize is that research shows that both native and multilingual writers use similar writing processes. So applying their language skills to create text for various audiences and purposes is once again important for all learners. And also, we want to emphasize the transition to English transcription involves, especially in the transcription skill area, navigating phonemes that may not exist in their home language. So this is a real emphasis on these foundational strands, particularly in automaticity of their spelling and their handwriting.
Yeah, so like I said before, and Maria said, my lens is mostly upper elementary, middle, and high school. From my experience working with early elementary, it seems across the board, every student has some kind of phonics or handwriting curriculum embedded in the district, right? Maybe it's Orton Gillingham, maybe it's foundations. I worked with foundations for a few years, handwriting with tears. But in my experience, it seems that for the most part, upper elementary, but especially middle and high school, a lot of these skills are not explicitly taught. This can be difficult if we're working with multilingual learners and possibly students coming from SLIFE backgrounds. This can be a challenge. We don't know what education or what that looked like in the past for them. So for some students, even in middle and high school, their transcription skills might not be fully there yet. So my recommendation, in my experience, what has worked is really being intentional with planning and pulling resources for your students when needed. That can definitely be difficult if you have multiple levels in the same classroom, but I'm going to provide you with some examples that I've used that have worked with my students. So right off the bat, I would recommend at the beginning of the year, if you have secondary level students, middle or high school multilingual learners, start off by making sure they know the letters in the alphabet and they're able to write the letters in the alphabet. I know that seems like a really basic thing, but for some students, if we assume that because they had an English class in the past, they already have this mastered, that might be doing them a disservice. So I would start with a knowledge check at the beginning of the year and assess if they know the letter names, sounds, and how to write each letter.
Right.
And then from there, I've worked a lot with newcomer students and level one multilingual learners, and I've noticed that most students have needed some support with the alphabet, even if it's just short vowel sounds, for example. But if you need help pulling resources, I recommend ESL Supplies. They have resources that aren't geared necessarily towards early childhood. I found that it sometimes can be hard to find resources that are lower level but aren't geared towards younger students because we want our students to feel empowered when they're learning the material. So this is a really good resource, the handwriting strokes. Again, if the student is coming from a SLIFE background, that might be helpful. The next slide. This is for isolating specific sounds. I can't recommend this book enough. I've used this actually with adult learners and with secondary level students. So this pronunciation guide helps you isolate specific sounds. So in terms of spelling, this is really great. As you know, in English, we have some sounds that kind of are interchangeable, like the medial D or T. Like my family has kind of a Philly accent, so we say water, not water. So this book does a really great job of isolating those sounds, and then students also practice writing those sounds, so that helps with their spelling and transcription skills. And Maria, I have one more example from this book. Yeah, so this is just an activity from there, and this is really great for incorporating listening and writing with your students. And I do have one more set of examples. So again, these are geared towards secondary level students. I found that a really great resource for students in higher level grades who might be on a lower reading and writing level is to use this decodable set from Saddleback. They isolate or group certain sounds and types of words in the books. So if a student is really starting from like kindergarten-ish reading level, you can help them work up to start gaining traction in the language. And I have an example of one of the texts on the next slide. So this is like one of the first books in the series, right? It focuses a lot on the CVC words. So then your life students or newcomer students can focus on short vowel sounds and spelling those words. And then if we look at the next slide, each of those series comes with activities. So then this can also help with isolating sounds and with spelling. So I found that especially for newcomer students or lower level students, these kinds of resources are accessible and they're not like little kid-ish or geared towards kindergarten, first grade students. And this is just another example from that series. Oh, and I just threw this in here. In the past, I've also tried to help with spelling skills by doing fun activities like songs, and then students will listen to the song and have to fill in the blank and try to spell the word correctly. So this one was unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield. And if you find that some of your SLIFE or newcomer students are struggling with the letter formation, you could find plenty of resources on YouTube and have them work on those and check in with them frequently to make sure that they're able to master that transcription because we want to lift the cognitive load.
And so before we dive into the next strand, which is the writing craft, we just want to emphasize again that the reason for the transcription skills to be one of the first strands we talk about is that essentially the automaticity part. So if students haven't gained some of those skills initially, it will be more challenging as they move through the different strands. And I see a question in the chat. We do have the slides available, so we'll publish that after this PLC. So yes, it'll be available. And so just an emphasis again that the transcription skills are very, very important because if they don't establish that first part, then once again, they will have a heavy lift moving on to the next strands. So the writing craft here, did you want to add something, Christiana, here?
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to say that Sadida focuses the writing craft strand on three parts: the word choice, so word choice in terms of vocabulary, writer's voice, and literary devices.
So when we talk about this strand two of the writing craft, it's primarily about developing an awareness of task, audience, and purpose, or TAP. So it's about expanding vocabulary, and TAP is a central element of the writing craft strand, and it's considered a critical mindset for students to adopt at every stage of the writing process. So when you think about task, we're thinking about what is the assignment? What form should it take? Is it an essay, report, or story? Who is the audience? Who is the reader? So research does indicate that students are more engaged and produce higher quality work when they write for an authentic audience rather than just for a grade. So when we think about the audience, it could be another teacher, it could be a peer, it could be a real world audience member, like a person in the community or in a business member. And then ultimately, the final part of this is purpose. What is the goal? Is it to inform? Is it to persuade? Or is it to tell a story? So once again, when we think about TAP, which is task, audience, purpose, one of the things that I have always used, and Joan Sedita does emphasize mentor text. So looking at, for example, a book like this, The Day the Crayons Quit, really asking students, what if your pencil was tired? How would you act, right? So this encourages students to write from the heart and inject personality into their writing and to develop a writer's voice. So word choice is very important here, moving from what we say are tired words like big or happy or sparkle words like enormous or gigantic or delighted. So we're really expanding vocabulary here. And then, of course, from a multilingual learner connection, integration of translanguaging sounds. You could focus on onomatopoeia, which is a fantastic bridge for MLs because the sounds are often represented differently across languages. This is a great mentor text. Mr. Brown, can moo, can you? So this would be an example of a great book to use. It introduces simple tools like alliteration and adds life to stories. So once again, voice is extremely important here, helping students understand that they can write in a way that sounds like them.
And then I also provided a couple examples of using sensory language. The first screenshot that I have on here was provided from the textbook. So Sadida gives ample examples in the book of different ways to incorporate this in the classroom. For example, she has this chart with different sensory words, your sound words, touch words, and then taste and smell words. And I have experience using strategies like this in my classroom that I found really effective. So each year that I've taught, Maria, you can head on to the next slide. Each year that I've taught in New Jersey, I've done an activity that's an apple tasting activity. And I've had students try 3 different varieties of apples and then write about what the apples taste like, smell like, and look like. We discuss it as a group as well, and then it turns into a writing activity. So I'm very explicit with them that they're trying to describe the apple, give as many words as possible to talk about what they see, what they smell, and what they taste. And then after they fill out the graphic organizer, you can see that the bottom left there, after they fill it out with their initial impression of each apple, I turn that into a writing activity and I provide students with sentence frames. So I have an example of that on the next slide. Oh, maybe it's
I
not.
put it out of order,
Okay,
I
that's
think.
okay. No problem. But I provide them with sentence frames, to then write to descriptive writing. Oh, we did that in my class voted on their favorite apple. Yep. My students always love Golden Delicious. I find that to be like the sweetest one. So, or the sweetest one I brought in. So they usually really like that. So that's a fun activity I've done with descriptive vocabulary. With voice, I like to do My Favorite Things by Julie Andrews. So I play the music video of the song, and we talk about how the tone for the most part is happy, right? She's describing all the things that she loves, and then there's a bridge at the end where she describes things she dislikes. And I use this as kind of an introduction to tone. So first the mentor text, they read it and we listen to the song, and then after that they develop their own version to the same song. So I think I have that on the next slide here. Um, yeah, so students then write about their favorite things, and then I just on like a Google Doc or slides, I have them provide images along with what they talk about. So that's also been something I found to be successful with getting my students excited about writing.
Okay, so we're going to dive in to critical thinking now, and we're going to talk a little bit about that strand here. So when you think about critical thinking, it's really the foundation of the entire framework. So if you can think of it as the engine of the writing rope, it is the mental work that happens before, during, and after a student picks up their pencil. So the goal is that we want to move from writing what they know, which is their knowledge and telling, to writing to learn and explain. So that's the knowledge transformation that we're seeking. And the components for this strand involves generating ideas, gathering information, information from sources, and organizing that information into a logical flow. So the focus in this strand is, yes, the focus on the strand is generating ideas and gathering information. And yes, we do hope so. Absolutely. So let's take a little moment here. What teaching strategy do you find most effective for enhancing writing skills? Do you find collaborative writing helpful, modeling, using graphic organizers, or do you find sentence frames helpful?
Yeah, definitely graphic organizer sentence frames. Hmm, so even.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, no. Sentence frames.
Yeah, I find sentence frames to be really helpful.
Yeah. We'll just wait for a few more seconds. Okay, we're going to move on. So when we think about the critical thinking strand, we're also really focusing if students can say it, they are most likely to be able to write it. And this is important to be thinking about producing an oral rehearsal before drafting. I think that's a very important practice for developing and drafting. And students can practice in their home language or in English. And speaking first builds clarity and confidence. So once again, I'm going to talk in terms of the lens for early childhood. So when you think about this strand using graphic organizers, which some of you have already answered that you find that helpful, specifically, let's say in first grade, a lot of the graphic organizers can be focused on that beginning, middle, and end. And it doesn't have to be written, it can be drawn. It can also be used simply by talking with somebody and collaboration and talking about what happened in the beginning, what happened in the middle, and what happened at the end. And then also Foursquare is another graphic organizer, and that can be used in many different ways. It could be used to talk about a theme or a main topic, and then building on each one with visuals and developing a sentence for each part of a paragraph.
Yep. So I have a picture of an idea web or a word web on this page. I love to get my students excited about a new topic by adding some kind of fun competition based activity at the beginning. I use the Price is Right background music, and I'll like say, okay, you have 1 minute to write as many things as possible about this word. And since I usually have newcomers and level 2 students, I, of course, allow them to respond in their first language as well. I also really enjoy, like Maria said, how important speaking is first to really start generating ideas. I typically like to pair my students or have them in small groups as part of a brainstorming activity. I have a photo on the next slide. Something I did recently in my classroom was I gave students a bunch of images or symbols from different holidays celebrated in the United States during the month of February. And in small groups, they had to try to sort them based on what they think went together. And then after that, you can just go on to that next slide. Um, they worked with people in their groups, and I'm fortunate to have some newcomer students who speak the same first language, so they're able to respond in both English and their L1, which is awesome to see them really access like their background information. So I like to do this as a kind of brainstorming activity to get them excited, and then after that, we will work through writing with graphic organizers and sentence frames together as a group, and then they will do that on their own. And then on the next slide, we have stuff from the book. So Sedita shows examples of really basic graphic organizers, so kind of similar to the previous slides, just getting your students thinking about the topic first. Here, you can see some descriptive words or things that go along with each season. And then Sedita provides examples of a kind of a same structure. Start with the initial brainstorming and then move on to graphic organizers. So the next slide are a couple examples of graphic organizers from her book. So like a very typical topic web. And then she also recommends using graphic organizers that give students a structure for what their writing should look like. And I think this is really important. Being explicit, like we've talked about that a lot, explicit with what we expect and what students should do makes the writing process easier for them. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see how for this particular topic, Sadida recommends giving this kind of graphic organizer where students can see, okay, first I need a topic sentence and a supporting sentence. Then after that, in my second paragraph, I need a topic and supporting, etc. So being explicit and direct with what we should expect from students in terms of their writing is very important.
And so I just want to emphasize here again, as we have said in the very beginning, we know that writing is hard. So for a first grader, trying to think of a story and spell every word at the same time is very difficult and challenging. So in this strand, in this planning stage, we have to think about the goal is to separate the thinking from the writing. So the graphic organizers really help in that way. It gives them a roadmap so they don't get lost. And so I will also emphasize here is this recursive cycle plan for the process writing routine, which is think, plan, write, and revise. And Joan Sedita has, and this is in the playlist of resources that we shared with you in her keys to early writing. She really emphasizes really going through revise and then go back to planning, revise and then go back. So write more after you revise. And I think this is probably one of those most challenging things to kind of plant the seed in the writing process with students. So rethink their ideas even midway through drafting. And the key strategies is brainstorming and gathering information from sources and using the graphic organizers to complete that and then going back again. So when they think, students discover ideas and gather the fuel from the resources that they're looking at, like books or personal memoirs. And when they plan, they're really using the tools to organize, like I said, that fuel into a roadmap. And when they're writing, students turn that plan into a draft. And the revising process is students look back at what they were thinking to see if this message is clear. I know we were going to kind of go back to this, but you wanted to add something, Christiana?
Yeah, so this is just another strategy to get students thinking about a topic, a particular topic you want them to write about. Sadida references different graphic organizers. This example is of noun and verb boxes. So maybe after students initially brainstorm words about a topic, then they could also sort them into either the noun box or the verb box, and that can kind of help them with the sentence structure as well. And then I just have an example of verb conjugation. So an extension after maybe separating the words into noun and verb boxes, then starting out with those with the sentence structure, you could have students work through verb conjugation exercises as well.
And also, our ML connection here is really, Sadida does emphasize that if, once again, if a student can say it, they are more likely to be able to write it. And so there's a clear emphasis for MLs to practice saying their plan out loud in their home language or in English before drafting. So really, oral language support lends itself into this written language development. So once again, I think that's the important ML piece here is if a student can say it, they're more likely to be able to write it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so syntax is, of course, our word order. Sadida goes into depth about syntax in the writing process. She says that syntax refers to the system and arrangement of words, phrases, clauses that make up the sentence, right? Our rules of grammar. And kind of emphasizing again, when students are familiar with things, it's easier for them to produce and make expressive language. So when students are familiar with the rules, they can grasp the meaning that comes from the sentences. And that process or that familiarity is called syntactic awareness. And Sadida says that this is foundational for strong writing.
So when we talk about syntax at the sentence level, we're talking about, so if you think about transcription as the mechanics, we think about critical thinking as the engine, and then syntax is the structure. So that equals how words are ordered to create meaningful sentences. And really building on what Christiana was saying is that syntactic awareness and knowing what a sentence is grammatically, when it is grammatically complete. So when we think about that in terms of strategy, a complete sentence needs a subject, predicate. So what does that look like in early childhood and in first grade specifically? I've done very many strategies using the who, what, where, when activities, sentence starters, graphic organizers, and you can make them into puzzles and matching or asking students or making it a game and really focusing on that bare bones sentence, starting with as simple as who is doing what. So that's can build to what we say is a sentence stretcher, and then adding to that organizer who is doing what, where, and when. And so this is just another in Keys to Early Literacy. Joan Sedita has similar concept here playing out into more of a sentence frame.
And Sadida also talks about color coding as an effective strategy. I found this to be effective as well. With newcomer students, if I provide a translation into their L1 and I also provide the English word, I'll often color code it so it's easy for the student to reference between the first language and English. I like to use the who, what, where, when, why, how structure in two different ways. I like to introduce it with reading first, and as a group, we typically identify each piece, and then they will do an activity independently. And then when I incorporate this with writing, they're expected to then create sentences where they answer the who, what, where, when, why. So on the next couple slides, we have examples with that as well. But we also have the sentence scramble. You want to talk about that, Maria?
Oh, just very simply using the same idea, building on it with the graphic organizers. When you have students do the who, what, where, when, you can actually then have students cut them out from sentence strips and then rearrange them and put them back together, sort of that multi-sensory piece. And then also you can organize, have them highlight, just like you said, in order, which part of the word goes, which part of the sentence in word order. Really, I want to also focus on the ML connection here. So syntax can be one of the hardest areas for multilingual learners because word order varies across language. So for example, in Spanish, adjectives often come after the noun, while in English they come before. So once again, and Christiana, you mentioned this early on, Joan Sedita really recommends very explicit and direct instruction when it comes to the structure, subject, predicate. She focuses on scaffolding with sentence frames. So providing MLs with stems or frames is very helpful. This allows them to participate in complex thinking while providing sort of a safety net for English word order. I didn't know, Christiana, did you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that in terms of the ML connection. An activity that I found to be useful incorporating the who, what, where, when, why words. I provide students with the picture from, I don't know if anyone is familiar with New York Times, what's going on in this picture. And then they have to talk with a peer and answer the who, what, where, when, why. And then after they speak about it, they have to write and explain it. I found that to be a useful tool to use that resource from New York Times. And then I've also found for the sentence level, when you're reviewing the different types of sentences, like your statement, for example, like statement, exclamation, an activity to get students to understand the difference could be turn this statement into an exclamation or turn this statement into a question activity. I found that to be useful as well for them to understand the different types of sentences.
Okay, so we're going to go into the last part of text structure. And really, text structure is the sort of the architecture of the entire piece. It is the organizational pattern that holds the ideas together as a reader, so a reader can follow them. So the text structure focuses on how different types of writing are organized. And the core elements in the writing rope really talk about these three main areas. So we're looking at narrative, informational, and opinion. There are three primary genres or purposes. Each has its own unique organizational roadmap. Also paragraph structure. So that's moving beyond simple sentences to understand a main idea or main ideas and supporting details. And then patterns of organization. So understanding specific relationships between ideas, such as description, sequence, first, next, and last, cause and effect, and then compare and contrast. So the ML connection here is a specific instruction on transition words. So MLs benefit greatly from being taught signal words that act as structural clues. So that could be first, second, finally, and making sure that there, once again, is that explicit instruction in those areas. Did you want to add to this, Christiana?
Sorry, can you view this 3 paragraph essay structure slide? Is that
Next?
oh maybe I think it was before maybe yeah, I have maybe I'll just put it in the chat then. I could put a screenshot of there's a resource that I have in terms of essay structure. So Sadida recommends throughout the book like color coding and doing an I do, we do, you do activity with color coding for text structure can be really useful for students. If you want to, maybe Maria, you can go through transition words and I could.
Because I think it's in here. Is this what you're
Oh.
talking? Yes, sorry. Yeah, I just skipped a few.
It might be the one that I'm referencing. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, so Sadida mentions throughout the text, it's really important to be explicit with students, and I think being explicit with the expectations or what to they need to do when they're writing is really important. So when you're picking graphic organizers, it's important to find stuff that aligns with the kind of text you want them to produce. So this screenshot just shows a couple examples of different kinds of writing. So problem solution, advantage, disadvantage, classification. And I think having students sort through the different examples first could be helpful, but then making sure when you're having them write, for example, a cause and effect type of writing piece, they're given the appropriate graphic organizer in advance.
And Christiana, I apologize if this is out of order.
Yeah, so this is just more examples of the graphic organizers. So yeah, just back to like the signal words, transition words, providing students with a kind of anchor chart like this, I think could be especially useful. Again, like being very explicit with what the expectation is and what they should produce is important because if we don't tell them what's expected, how can we achieve that goal? So I think focusing on giving students examples of mentor texts, the correct graphic organizers, and signal words are critical to their success with writing. And then this was just an example of color coding a text together with students. So you would provide students with the text and together you would color code different elements of that text. So this is an example of the closing paragraph. So the teacher and the students would work through looking through each sentence and then color code them based on what the sentence is doing. So as you can see, the blue sentence here is the final transition of the main argument in the closing paragraph. Then the yellow sentence is a recap of those three main reasons that they had in the paragraph or in the article. And then the final statement is that green color-coded statement. So I think using color coding as a resource can be really helpful with writing as well. And that's just an example from the body paragraph of the color coding.
Same thing here, Christiana.
Yep, yeah, that's the beginning of that.
And we apologize that it's a little bit out of order, but what we do want to just go back to saying, all of the strategies that Joan Sedita suggests in her book are highlighted specifically under an instructional core of this gradual release of responsibility. So I do, we do, you do models kind of at the core of her framework. So teachers must think aloud while writing to show MLs the internal process of choosing words and organizing text. And she really emphasizes also collaborative writing. So allowing MLs to write with peers to practice language in a low stakes environment. So this is something that's woven into each of the aspects that we have talked about tonight in each of the strands. One last engagement question for all of you. Which of the 5 strands of the writing rope do you find the most challenging to teach? So yeah, it looks like by a long shot the critical thinking strand, yes, and that is, and I think that you would find that. But once again, I will emphasize with the early childhood, with first and second graders, really taking a look at transcription skills as the key. And I think we do have to emphasize again that, like the reading rope, the writing rope works in that each of the strands are needed for the entire framework to work. Each of those strands are important overall to the writing process and in terms of writing to skill development. And so with that, once again, we have shared in the chat at the beginning a PDF of some resources that we found helpful. And also, we will share this, I believe, and I think if Catherine is here, want to let everybody know. Oh, thank you. And she shared that again with everybody in the chat. So we just want to take this time. We have a few minutes to answer any questions, just any questions that we could answer for you.
Thank you, ladies. I don't see any questions. I will let everyone know that I did put the link for the PD certificate and evaluation form in the chat. I'm going to post that again. Also, that we have 2 more PLC literacy sessions coming up. Next week, we have evidence-based practices in literacy for speakers of Black English. And then in April, we have Maria and Christiana coming back again to talk about verbal reasoning and literacy knowledge. And certainly if people were interested in critical thinking, I think that will, answer some of the questions that people may have about that. If no one has any other questions, thank you very much, ladies. This was very informative. Teaching writing was always something that I thought was very important in my ESL teaching, and you guys did a great job explaining how to teach the students and how to make it easier for teachers to feel comfortable doing it, which is really important. So thank you very much. If no one else has any questions, then have a very good evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for attending.